Harry Cook, United States Marine Corps, Korea, the Forgotten War. I had the great pleasure and opportunity of meeting and interviewing Harry years ago in Phoenix, Arizona. It was July 14, 2007, folks. He told an amazing story of what it was like fighting in Korea at the Chosin Reservoir at the age of 23. I actually have a picture. One of the things he gave me was the menu that the 1st Marine Division had for Thanksgiving Day dinner. I'll put it in this video. You'll love it. It's fun to see that. And we just had Thanksgiving a couple days ago. So Harry's one of my troopers, one of my Marines. Hoorah, Semper Fi, Harry. Thank you for sharing a powerful story with me. Harry served with Fox Company, the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division in the infantry. And like I said, one of the best stories of the Chosin Reservoir that I have. So these veterans are featured in my documentaries, folks. I have documentaries of all the wars, and I never interviewed them thinking I would release their interviews someday, but I'm doing that. And Brandon Glidden, you're making it possible again for others to hear Harry's story today. Thank you, Brandon, for sponsoring this story, making it possible for especially our younger generation to learn. History is best learned from those who are there. I would encourage you, watching these stories, you're being blessed, you're being encouraged, you're being inspired. I would encourage you to consider becoming a sponsor or donating to my work. I don't monetize my videos, folks, no commercials here. I don't want to interrupt these stories, so please consider becoming a sponsor. It means a great deal to me, these veterans, their families, and the younger generation that watches these on a daily basis. So I would encourage you to subscribe to this channel, and like I said, sponsor these interviews. There's information in the video description, comment section, and on my website, larrycapetta.com. So thank you, God bless you. Thank you for sharing these stories, like I said, and subscribing to my channel, Voices of History. Let's keep this thing going, folks. Freedom is not free, freedom is earned. God bless you. No, I'm on. I don't need a green light. It doesn't
Oh.
be on, so we're okay.
Okay.
Let's just tell me again the year you went to Korea.
1950.
Okay. And 1st Marine Division.
1st Marine Division.
Okay. Let's just get into Korea. How old were you at that time?
23, I think. 23.
Okay. And your MOS, a rifleman?
Infantry.
Okay. Was there a division, a battalion?
Well, Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment of the 1st Marine Division.
Okay. And your rank at that time?
PFC.
I've done a lot of interviews about the Chosin Reservoir. When did you make the Incheon landing?
I made the Incheon landing and then went into Seoul and chased the North Korean army out of there, turned it back over to Syngman Rhee, the South Korean president, and for all intents and purposes, the war was over. The North Korean army was running away, trying to hide from the North Korean civilians, and it was all over, but General MacArthur was so mad. He was very anti-communist, and he wanted to punish them. So he had us go aboard ship, went around the peninsula up to North Korea, and landed at a place called Wonsan. And then we went up into the mountains, and one of the first things that a young lieutenant learns, either at the West Point or at the Marine Officer School, is you don't divide your forces. And he did. We had 3 regiments, the 1st Marines, the 5th Marines, and the 7th Marines. And he had us in 3 different villages where we were too far away from, we could not mutually support each other. And the North Koreans government, or the Chinese government, had told the U.S. at the UN in New York that if we came up there where the North Korea borders Manchuria, China, that they were going to enter the war. And he was advised of this, but he poo-pooed it. He said, they won't come into it, they're afraid of us. Well, one morning we woke up and there were 7 divisions of Chinese out there that didn't get the word that they're supposed to not come over there. And so for the next 12 or 14 days, whatever it was, I don't remember how many days, we had to fight our way back to the sea. Now, we were 78 miles from the ocean. So the 7th Marines fell back to the 5th Marines, and then the 2 of them came back to where we were. We were the closest regiment, the 1st Marines were, to the ocean for the Navy to come pick us up. And everything froze up. Any engine in a truck, a tank, a Jeep, you had to start it continuously. You didn't dare leave it off because the block would freeze up. And it did on some of them. They just shoved them off the side of the road.
Just tell me some history of the Chosin Reservoir and your involvement with that.
Well, I wasn't all the way up to the reservoir. I was in this little village of Coterie, and we got attacked there not a few times, more probing attacks, but we were right at the head of the, where the road from the sea came up and leveled off. There was a huge hydroelectric plant there, and there was a bridge that we had to cross this ravine to get by there and get on down the road, and they had blown the bridge. So the Air Force brought over these parts for it's a Bailey bridge, like an old erector set. You snap it together and put bolts in there, and they got it reconstructed, or we would never have made it out. I don't think. There was no way to get. We'd had to go overland, and we wouldn't have made it.
Well, Harry, tell me about some of the combat there. You said you didn't make it all the way up, so what involvement did you have with the Chinese?
Well, they came and probed our lines, and we'd shoot them and they'd shoot back. But the 5th and 7th Marines were the ones that caught hell. This battle was, I maintain, as somewhat of a historian, that this was the most horrific battle the Marines were ever in. Older Marines will say, oh, Iwo Jima was worse. Well, in ways it was, but if you got wounded on Iwo Jima, the hospital ship or medical facilities were right offshore. They could get you there, bang. Up there, there was no way, no ambulance going to take you down the hill. Planes flew in with replacements and ammo and water and stuff, and they threw everything off and jammed wounded guys in there and flew them to Japan. And that's all well and good. But when the whole thing was over, 17 people received the Medal of Honor at the Chosin Reservoir, more than any other action, and it was very short period of time. Iwo took several weeks, and it got all the publicity because of the flag raising, and there were a lot of Marines killed there. Hell, I mean, the casualty rate was horrific, but still, I think we were I wasn't on Iwo, I was up by the reservoir.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do with this documentary, is to help people learn about what happened there now.
Well, what happened, the Army was over on the other side of the reservoir. See, this reservoir was built to generate, for a body of water necessary for hydroelectric power, and the power station was down where we were, so the water would come down there and make the turbines go and create electricity. Well, the Army was over on the other side, and they didn't do very well. When the Chinese attacked them, they beat them up pretty bad, and they started a retrograde movement to the rear. And the Chinese kept attacking, and they just threw their weapons away and ran off and left their dead and wounded in the ambulances and trucks. Well, the Marines that were over on the other side were looking out over the frozen ice. I mean, and they saw people, and they thought they were Chinese, so they were going to open fire. And Colonel Olin Beale, who was the division motor transport officer, was there, Lieutenant Colonel, and he said, "Hold on a minute." And he looked through some field glass. He said, "Those aren't Chinese; those are GIs." So he got his Jeep driver, and they went out there. which was a pretty risky thing to do with nobody else around. They put 3 guys on the hood, 1 guy in the back, and the colonel got out and put another guy in his seat, and they drove back, and then they got more vehicles out there, and they picked up about 300 or 200 or 300 of these wounded soldiers. And we have the organization that other guys have told you about, the Chosin few. Well, there's a guy here up at Prescott, Ed, can't think of Ed's last name. All he has for fingers is like that. He was in that Jeep that the colonel went out there and picked him up. He was one of the 5 guys that they brought back in that first group. And that's all he has for fingers from the first knuckle out. And you think he doesn't love Marines? The guy, he's a great guy. And that just made us mad as hell when we found that out. That we brought everybody we could. We buried some people in a couple of mass graves, and we always had hoped that we could go back, get relations with North Korea, because the engineers know exactly, they surveyed the thing and they know exactly where those graves are. They could get the bodies out and bring them back. But
when the Army was overrun.
Yeah, they just overran them. Yeah, it's a fact. I mean, it ain't a nice story, but that's what happened.
And tell me the purpose of the Marines coming in and what the objective was.
Well, the objective was to kill some more North Koreans of their army. They were trying to get away. And General MacArthur wanted to punish them for starting the thing. And that's what the purpose of our, there was no tactical reason really. I mean, their army wasn't doing anything, but once the Chinese came in, and then the whole thing came to another boiling point.
Tell me about the Chinese and the numbers of the Chinese.
Well, there were 7 full divisions and parts of 3 others, and I don't know the numbers. I don't have one of my books with me. But there were thousands of them against one handful. We were fighting out of our weight class, body-wise, like Joe Louis fighting some featherweight. And it was just, you didn't have to really aim. You just stuck your rifle out and pointed and shot, because there was somebody out there that was going to get hit.
Well, as far as the operation for the Marines, was it a victory or was it a defeat?
Well, it was a victory. Now, there's a journalist, an English journalist was up there along with some Americans, and he asked General O.P. Smith, our division commander, he said, this is a retreat, and he was quoted, the general was quoted as saying, "Retreat hell. We're just attacking in a different direction." But he never said that. He was a very unprofane man. He would never swear. He wouldn't say damn it or hell. He was just the way he was. And my regimental commander, Colonel Chesty Puller, told one of the journalists, "Hey, we've got them right where we want them. We're surrounded and we can shoot in any direction and kill Chinese." And that was literally true. They were all around, like a wagon train, like Custer at Little Bighorn. You could shoot any direction you were going to hit an Indian.
So we're driving the Chinese and or North Koreans back? Is that why we're going up the Chosin Reservoir?
No, not the Chinese weren't even in it. We got up there and we were just sitting around. And then all of a sudden they came into it. We had run into a few on the way up. They were already there, but not many. And they tried to stop us from going up, but we went through them, there were no big, massive Chinese. But General MacArthur wanted, before that he wanted the nationalist Chinese that were on Formosa to go to China, back to China, and harass them there. And he was a good general, but he'd lost it. I mean, he should have retired and gone back to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York and lived there.
Tell me about the casualties that we sustained at the Chosin Reservoir.
Okay, everybody, the equipment, the cold weather equipment was abysmal. The shoe packs were rubberized, like a rubber. Guys used to put rubber slippers like on their shoes when it was raining to keep their shoes dry.
Just look at me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know you want
Yeah.
to look at, for the camera's sake. Just
All right, and they were all right. They kept the water out, but what they did, if you'd be walking, marching, running, your foot would sweat, and then you'd stop, and that perspiration would freeze. I only got a little teeny bit on one foot, and I didn't have any problem, but people lost every extremity, fingers, ears, noses, genitals, arms and legs. The equipment was just horrible, much like sending the troops into Iraq without the armored vests.
Why weren't we equipped?
Government. The war's over. So we've conquered the world. Japan surrendered. Germany surrendered. There'll never be another war. And so everything went to hell. I had 2 years in the Army before I went to Korea as a Marine. I was in the Army of Occupation in Korea from 46, right at the end of the war. And we never trained. We didn't do any training. All guys were just running around on fire watch, and the same way in Japan. That's why when North Korea came across the 38th parallel that Sunday morning, they rolled up the Army like a cheap rug. The kids had no training. Most were like me, draftees. I was in basic training down in Texas when they dropped the bomb. And needless to say, I never saw any action in World War II.
What was the fighting like in Korea and at the Chosin Reservoir?
Well, it was, I say all your weapons, even your machine guns, wouldn't fire at the normal rate of fire. Instead of going broop, they go boop, boop, boop. Artillery pieces were slow to go back into battery after they fired around. And if it hadn't been for the Marine and Navy Air, we probably wouldn't have gotten out of there. They supported us marvelous. Guys flew in there. More than one of them crashed into a mountain and died, trying to get down and strafe the Chinese. And
were there human wave attacks?
Yeah, but not where I was. That was up further north. And the human wave attacks became more prevalent after we went down, got out of there and went back down to South Korea, and then started back up to liberate Seoul again. They were more prevalent then. But they occurred up at the reservoir, but I wasn't there. I didn't see it like later.
Well, you're a young man, first time in combat?
Oh, yeah, hell yeah.
So what was the morale of the other troops, and how do you really stay focused with the cold and then the fighting? I mean, how do you keep your sanity in a situation like that?
I think the whole thing is, from boot camp on, when we landed at Incheon, sure I was scared, hell yeah, I never, but I was more scared of doing something dumb that would cause a casualty to the guy on my left or right. And that is ingrained in you. If you get out of boot camp, I had 2 years aboard ship in a Marine detachment on a carrier, and then I went up to Sandpoint Naval Air Station in Seattle in a guard detachment there. And we drilled all the time. We went out in small groups, fire team and squad maneuvers and stuff on the base there. There was area there where we could play Marine. And so, I thought I knew what to do, but those poor guys in the Army, particularly there at the beginning, when they came across the 38th parallel and hit the Army. They didn't have any knowledge of what the hell they were doing.
Did you lose any friends at the Chosin Reservoir, Harry?
One guy. Yeah, I mean.
Were you with them when that happened, or what?
No, I was. We were in the same platoon. He was in another squad, and he got killed. But and I'd lost one on the way from Incheon to Seoul, who had been with me up at Sandpoint. He got the Medal of Honor for knocking out some North Korean tanks.
What was the most difficult thing you had to do or experience?
Keeping awake. The cold saps your strength. You're lethargic. You just you want to get someplace where there's something you can set on fire. That was probably the worst part of it. It was just you'd tell somebody to go over there and do something, and the guy'd maybe walk over there, and then he'd stop and he wouldn't realize, what am I doing here? It's funny. I mean, it's horrible, but it's humorous in a way. And it just, you were so cold and you were hungry. You couldn't cook anything. Your sea rations, as bad as they are, you had no way to heat them up, really. It had heat tablets, but they were frozen solid. Just.
Is it still real to you how cold and the
Oh yeah.
Or is it something that happened a long time ago you don't remember it anymore?
Oh no, I think about it. I don't like it here. I'm an ocean guy, but it's a family situation. A lot of people that were there live in Arizona because they physically need to be here where it's hot. At the Chosin Few, this is probably the largest chapter, the Arizona chapter, of any of the others around the country.
Wonder why I haven't got to talk to many of them. I mean, not many people have come forward to want to talk.
Well, that's it. The Library of Congress is trying to get guys from World War II. And I just saw the number again now. There are 1,000 World War II veterans dying every day. They want the audio history thing at the Library of Congress.
So as far as the Chosin Reservoir and your involvement there in Korea as a whole, how long were you in Korea?
I was there for about 9 months. I left in 51.
Was there ever a point where you felt invincible and then it changed when they started? Were you close enough to the Chinese when they're firing at you and all that?
Oh yeah, not so much at the reservoir as after. Then.
What was the most fierce fighting you encountered?
Well, in Seoul. In Seoul. Personally, there because you had to chase them out of every building. So room by room, floor by floor. So that.
Why is Korea referred to as the Forgotten War, Harry?
Because it was. It was unpopular. It just kind of disappeared. There was no D-Day, no Berlin capture of Berlin. Seoul was an oriental place that nobody knew where Korea was. On that Sunday when they came across the border, some of us were at a Marine rifle range from Sandpoint, and a guy had a radio on, and he broke into a music program and said that the AP just said that the North Korean forces have crossed the 38 parallel and are attacking South Korea. And further news as it comes available, and went back to music. And I said to a couple of guys that were sitting there, it was Sunday and we were playing cards, we didn't shoot that day. I said, well, you better pay attention to what happens next week because we had one more week at the range. And the guy said, why? I said, you hear what that guy just said on the radio? He said, so what? I said, we're going to be going there. I said, we got a treaty with South Korea. And we did. And but we came back and we didn't have any problem when we came back like the guys from Vietnam did. People just basically ignored us. They didn't know what that. I landed in San Diego and went on Liberty that night. Most of the guys were shipped out immediately. They were reserves, and they had orders for them. I didn't have orders for several days till for my next duty station. I went downtown and went in and got the hottest shower and had a barber shave me and even got a manicure. And they were really, the people in San Diego were great. Two of us went together, and we went in this nice restaurant, and so I asked for the check, and the waiter said, "No check, that gentleman over there, and he invites you to come over and have a drink with him." And so we went over, and he's a guy there on business from someplace, and had us sit down with him, and bought us another round of drinks, and everybody was nice in that respect. But
well, historically, why were we in Korea? Why did we get involved there?
Well, we had a treaty. At the end of the war, the Russians wanted to clobber Japan and take over the Japanese islands. And they still occupy some islands up there that they should not be there, but that's Russia. And so somebody arbitrarily selected the 38th parallel on a map. Okay, that's Russia can occupy that, America will occupy it. And we were there, and they would get a bunch of North Koreans liquored up and get them to come down across the border. There was no real defense there. And they'd come into Seoul and agitate the unemployed South Koreans, and they'd start riots, and that's about all I mean, that was all the action I had, going downtown from our barracks and forcing them to break up their riot. But
now, as far as the Chosin Reservoir, the American casualties, the cold, I mean, I've heard stories there were truckloads of casualties.
Oh yeah.
So what do you remember about the casualties?
Oh, they were there. Our Navy medics, corpsmen, did valiant work. It was so cold that, I don't know if you've ever seen a morphine syringe. Okay, it looks like a Blistex thing you put on your lips, and it has a needle on it. Well, it was frozen, so you couldn't use it. They'd put two of them in each cheek, like a chipmunk, and work on the guy, and they'd keep him warm enough so they could give him morphine and for a bad wound. And we wouldn't. There was a hell of a lot of us that wouldn't have made it out of there if it hadn't been for those guys. They're the greatest people in the world. You want to get a Marine mad, say something bad about the Navy corpsman.
What about did you eat food?
Oh, we ate, but they tried to heat it up and have us come down off the hill where we were, down to the battalion CP area. And one thing, we got a lot of oatmeal. Like, oatmeal sticks to your ribs. They'd make a big pot of it and put a bunch of canned butter in there and brown sugar, and then we'd eat it. But
so did you help any of the wounded? Were you able to help a sister?
I never. The few times we never got anybody hit during those probing attacks. So I'd helped a couple of wounded guys on the way to Seoul. I mean, you drag some guy out of the line of fire or something. But
do you remember Thanksgiving of '50 where you were?
Oh yeah.
Where were you?
We were back down at in Busan or Mason at the outside of there. I had gotten pneumonia at the reservoir, and they had me in a hospital to get, and I was in a schoolhouse, and we had a turkey dinner. It was pretty darn good. About the best Thanksgiving I ever had, I think.
How about Christmas and Christmas Eve? Was that at the Chosin Reservoir?
Oh no, nobody was there at Christmas. No, we don't.
So you guys you didn't retreat. I like the way you said it, but does history prove that we retreated? We were beat up, or how does history?
Well, history has been pretty good about that, because the books that have been written by guys that were there, or either as journalists or as Marines, or it really, I mean, it was a withdrawal. I mean, you were there and you got went away, but we killed a hell of a lot more of them than they ever thought of killing us. Yeah, we just, the air would they'd come up and napalm them and bomb them and strafe them, and thousands of them died. And we brought the division back. An Air Force general told our General Smith, "You get your people someplace where my planes can land, and I'll bring you out." And he said, "No, we're bringing our casualties and our equipment with us." I don't think the general, the Air Force guy would have worked. It might have, but I don't know those things.
What about people? Did people freeze to death?
Oh, hell yes. Guys would fall asleep, and if the other, you try to have two men in a foxhole. So at night, one guy sleeps, the other guy stays awake. Well, if both of them doze off, and nobody else comes along and kicks them in the butt, wake them up, they could freeze overnight.
You think a lot of Marines froze then like that?
I don't think too many did. I never knew of anybody, but I've read about it. Guys have told me that they knew some people that froze up there. But you were too scared to sleep. And like I say, the cold saps your strength mentally and physically. And I think that was my biggest fear, was that I would fall asleep. And we had warming tents there. We'd set up 5-man tents, and they'd try to bring one guy out of the foxhole in there and stay in there for about 10 or 15 minutes, get a little warm, and then go back, and the other guy would come in and stuff, try to rotate it around. But the cold was just, that was it. I mean, that was the biggest thing, was it just drained everything out of you. It was like guys freeze, get lost in the snow someplace on a mountain here in the States. Horrible.
Now, as far as the combat you personally experienced, was it just small arms fire? Was it
mostly?
How close did you get close to the enemy at all, or?
Well, on the way to Seoul, yeah, but not at the reservoir. I mean, there was mostly shooting at distance. They never got into our lines where I was. They did to the other units that were up further north. Oh yeah, they were in there. They had Chinese right there on top of them.
Were you aware of bugles being blown?
Oh yeah, we heard that even there. Yeah, bugles and whistles. And there's a book. Do you have a library of any books on the reservoir?
Got one or two, I think.
Something called Drums and Bugles. I think I have it, or my son has it. He may have it. One son.
How about after the war, the cold? I hear some guys slept with their socks on. Did you do stuff like that, or?
Well, you slept with your boots on. You didn't dare take them off. Just everything froze.
Do you know how many people were killed in Korea?
No, it's in one of my books, I'm sure.
How about what should our country know or learn about Korea, Harry?
Well, you better keep your troops trained. You better do that, because if you don't, then they're going to suffer when they go into combat. And we've had a tendency to do that historically since Valley Forge or the Revolution. In between wars, we normally do not keep the level of the training as high as it should be. You can't just plug it in like you do a toaster. You got to leave it plugged in all the time. That's the only way you're going to be able to be effective.
Tell me quickly about freedom. What does freedom mean to you, and tell me about the price of freedom.
Well, the cliche, freedom isn't free. That's just it. But you can't disguise leadership's ineptness by saying we're doing this for freedom. And I'm sure you'd want to edit out what I think about Iraq.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
What about being a veteran of Korea? Are you proud of that?
Oh, hell yeah. I was there.
Have people thanked you for that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How does that make you feel when they thank you?
Well, I say thank you, and, it's good that somebody said that, realizes what you did was good. Whatever war you were in.
Did you ever get into hand-to-hand combat?
Oh, only one time.
In Korea?
Yeah. That was just a North Korean snuck up on us one night. We took care of him, the guy in the hole.
Do you think there was some of that going on at the Chosin?
Oh, there was all kinds of that further north. They didn't hit where we were in Coterie, like they did the 5th and 7th Marines up north.
Are they trained for situations like that?
Well, you train it, sure. But the training, that you see some guy in a martial arts situation in a bar. The good guy's getting roughed up by 3 guys, and he turns his kung fu skills into a melee and disables all 3 of them. Well, in combat, you don't have much chance for any kickboxing. It's a wrestling match, and you always like to have a real sharp knife to stab somebody with in a situation like that. That's what happened there. I stabbed the guy. My buddy stabbed him in another place, and we threw him out of the foxhole.
The camaraderie of the Marine Corps?
That's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. It's part of everything you do, no matter what you do. The Marine theory, every Marine is a rifleman. Your MOS, primary MOS, may be motor transport, administration, dispersing, cooks and bakers, whatever. But every Marine we try to, I'm not up to date on it right now, but in my time, you went to the range every year for 2 weeks. Everybody went. Didn't matter what your job was in the unit, and you kept up your rifle shooting skills so that you were ready to go as a replacement to a rifle company if necessary. And hell, that happened all the time in Korea. We'd have people come up from the rear when things got hot and heavy.
How would you define combat?
Dirty. That's one word. You're scared, but like I say, more scared of doing something stupid to get somebody else hurt. After a bit, you know it's there. I mean, you've had people shot. You might have got shot yourself,
Can you do one more thing? You did this last time, but things are working good today. I'm going to ask you to give me a salute into the camera when I tell you here.
Okay.
It's from where you're seated.
Now, I should point out that we, in the Marine Corps, we do not salute uncovered.
Or sitting down. But for the sake of the camera, can I
Sure.
get you to do it?
Sure.
Okay, Harry, right into the camera. Go ahead. Thank you.